The desert awoke, slowly, reluctantly, as if the darkness itself resisted surrender. Ochre and rust bled across the horizon, pushing back against a sky bruised violet and indigo. Garrett Brennan felt the familiar pulse beneath him, the rhythmic thunder of his Harley Davidson soft tail, a mechanical heartbeat synchronized with his own. 16 years. 16 years of the same ritual, the same stretch of cracked asphalt cutting through the Arizona wilderness like a scar through ancient skin. The engine's growl was his meditation, the wind against his face, a baptism repeated every dawn. At 63, Garrett carried his years like the desert carried its stones worn smooth by time, but unbroken beneath the surface. His silver hair, long and wild, whipped behind him like a tattered banner of surrender to age, framing a face that maps and memories had carved with ruthless precision. Every line told a story. Every scar whispered of battles fought in dim lit bars and moonless desert nights, of blood spilled and oaths broken, of a darkness he had clawed his way out of with bleeding hands. His frame, no longer the sharp edged weapon of his youth, had settled into something more enduring. Solid, dense, like the red rock formations rising around him, shaped by erosion but standing still, defiant against the elements. The leather vest he wore, soft as skin, from years under the sun, concealed faded ink beneath ghostly serpents and skulls, and symbols of a brotherhood he had left behind. The Crimson Riders. He had been their president once, their stone fist, their judge and executioner. They had called him Ironstone. Now he was just Garrett. Or so he told himself each morning as the sun climbed and the miles disappeared beneath his tires. The air still held night's coolness, carrying the sharp, sweet scent of creosote and dust, the perfume of survival in a place that killed the unprepared. He rode toward Red Canyon, a town of 3,000 souls, clustered at the desert's edge like pilgrims around a dying fire. It was a place where everyone knew everyone, where two stoplights governed traffic, where Main Street ended at the place Garrett needed most, the Haven Diner. His mother's diner. Vera Brennan, 85 years old, and tough as mesquite wood, had run that diner for 40 years. It was more than a business. It was the town's living room, its confession booth, its morning ritual. The smell of coffee and bacon grease, the sound of ceramic plates, and easy laughter. These were the rhythms that kept Red Canyon's heart beating. Garrett could picture her now, already at the grill, her small hands moving with the practiced grace of 4 decades, her sharp eyes missing nothing, her mouth quick with a joke or a gentle reprimand. A smile touched his lips, rare and genuine, softening the hard geography of his face. This quiet, predictable rhythm was his redemption. Every sunrise ride, every cup of coffee at the counter, every moment spent in Vera's orbit was proof that a man could change, that the past did not have to be a life sentence. He pulled the Harley into the gravel lot, the engine's rumble announcing his arrival like it always did. The early truckers were already there, their rigs casting long, angular shadows across the pavement. Garrett swung his leg over the bike boots crunching on gravel and walked toward the entrance. The scent of fresh coffee grew stronger, with each step a promise of normalcy, of home. But something was wrong. His hand froze an inch from the door handle. The air had changed, gone thick and strange, charged with a tension that raised the hair on his neck. It wasn't the usual pre-dawn quiet of the desert, nor the peaceful lull before the breakfast rush. This was different. Deeper. The kind of silence that came before violence, before blood. Garrett's instincts, honed by years of survival in a world where hesitation meant death, screamed a warning. His pulse quickened. His senses sharpened. The old reflexes buried but not dead surged through his nervous system like voltage through copper wire. He pushed the door open. The bell above jangled obscenely cheerful in the sudden stillness. The diner was wrong. Everything about it was wrong. The usual symphony of morning sounds, the clink of spoons against ceramic, the murmur of tired voices, the hiss of the grill, all of it was absent. In its place, a silence so complete it felt like a held breath. The checkered floor gleamed under fluorescent lights. The red vinyl booths sat empty. And, behind the counter, B. Jensen, the 50-year-old waitress who had worked here for 15 years, stood with her back to him, wiping the same spot on the counter over and over. Her shoulders hunched, her movements mechanical. B. Garrett's voice came out rough, edged with something he didn't want to name. Fear. Not for himself, never for himself, but for what the silence meant. B flinched like she'd been struck. She spun around and Garrett saw her face, pale, eyes wide and red-rimmed, lips trembling. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Only a small choke sound that might have been his name or a prayer. Her gaze darted toward the kitchen entrance, then back to him. And in that look, Garrett saw everything he needed to know. Something terrible had happened. His eyes followed hers, sweeping past the empty booths to the window seat at the far end of the diner. The morning sun, now fully risen, poured through the glass with brutal clarity, illuminating the small figure sitting there. Vera. The world tilted. Time stretched and warped. Garrett's vision tunneled until all he could see was his mother, his fierce, indomitable mother, sitting in her usual booth with a cup of coffee untouched before her. The sunlight was merciless. It showed him everything. Her face was a landscape of violence. One eye swollen shut, the flesh around it, a grotesque purple-black like a storm cloud trapped beneath her skin. Her lower lip split open, dark blood crusted at the corner of her mouth. A bruise spread across her left cheek in the shape of knuckles, the imprint of a fist. Her silver hair, always so carefully pinned, hung loose and disheveled around her face. But worse than the physical damage, worse than the brutal evidence of what had been done to her, was the look in her one good eye. Terror. Raw and absolute. A fear so profound it seemed to have hollowed her out from the inside. Garrett had seen his mother face down drought and debt, bury a husband, survive a robbery at gunpoint. He had never, not once in 63 years, seen fear in Vera Brennan's eyes. Until now. The coffee cup slipped from his fingers. It hit the floor and exploded shards of ceramic scattering across the checkered tile like shrapnel. The sound was sharp and final, a gunshot in a cathedral. Mother, the word came out broken, barely a whisper, torn from someplace deep in his chest where the old fury lived, where Ironstone had never really died, only slept. He moved, not walked. Moved. His body carried him across the diner in 3 long strides, boots loud on the tile pulse, hammering in his ears. He dropped to his knees beside her booth, his large, calloused hands reaching out, hovering afraid to touch her. Afraid he would cause more pain. Vera flinched. Just a small tremor, but it went through Garrett like a blade. Mom, his voice cracked. Who did this? She looked at him with her good eye, and he saw it all there. The fear, yes, but also something else. Shame. As if this violence, this desecration, was somehow her fault. As if she had failed by being vulnerable. Garrett. Her voice was barely there, a thread of sound, hoarse and ragged. I'm okay. I slipped in the kitchen. Clumsy old woman. The lie hung in the air between them, fragile and transparent. Garrett's jaw clenched so hard, his teeth ached. His hand still hovering near her face, curled into fists. Don't. The word came out low and dangerous. Don't lie to me, Mom. Not about this. Vera's eye filled with tears that didn't fall. Her chin trembled. They said not to tell you. They said it would be worse. For everyone. Or, who said? Garrett leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than a shout. Who did this to you? She took a shaky breath, wincing at the pain it caused. When she spoke, the words came out halting, each one a small surrender. Apex Holdings, a company from Phoenix. They've been sending letters for 3 months, wanting to buy the diner, wanting to buy the whole downtown block. Her gaze drifted around the diner, touching the worn counter, the faded photographs on the wall, the coffee maker that was older than some of the truckers. They want to build a casino resort. Garrett had heard the rumors. A Phoenix development company buying up properties in Red Canyon one by one. But Vera's diner was the last holdout, the final piece they needed. Most folks in town figured it was just business, the inevitable march of progress, swallowing another small town. They had no idea. The letter stopped being polite after the first month. Vera continued, her voice gaining a fragile strength as the truth spilled out. Then things started happening. A window broken, trash dumped on the doorstep, my truck tires slashed. She paused, swallowing hard. I reported it to Wade. Every time. He said it was probably kids, vandalism, nothing to worry about. Wade Holloway, the sheriff. Garrett's friend for 20 years, the man he'd shared beers with every Friday night, the man whose daughter Garrett had watched grow up. The realization that Wade might be involved, might have dismissed these threats deliberately, sent a fresh wave of cold fury through Garrett's veins. This morning, Vera's voice dropped to barely a whisper. A man came in. Before dawn. Big. Bald head. Scar across his neck like someone tried to cut his throat and failed. She shuddered. He said I had 24 hours to sell. He said there would be accidents if I didn't. Accidents that looked natural. Especially for old women. Her hand reached out, gripping Garrett's wrist with surprising strength. He knew about you, Garrett. He knew about Ironstone. He said your past wouldn't protect me. That you were old news. Washed up. The words landed like body blows. Not because they insulted him. Garrett had been called worse, but because they revealed the calculation behind the violence. Whoever was behind Apex Holdings knew exactly who Garrett Brennan used to be. They knew, and they had beaten his mother anyway. A message. A challenge. Or a test. Garrett's vision narrowed. The diner fell away. The only thing that existed was the cold fury building in his chest, spreading through his veins like ice water. It was a feeling he recognized had spent 16 years trying to bury. The feeling of a switch being flipped, a cage door, opening the beast inside, stretching, and remembering what it was. Garrett! Vera's voice pulled him back. Please, don't go back to that life. That's what they want. They want you to do something stupid so they can what? Garrett's voice was calm now. Deadly calm. The kind of calm that came before storms. Hurt you worse. Kill you, Mom. They already crossed that line. He stood his full height, casting a shadow over her. His hands were steady. His mind, for the first time in hours, was crystal clear. The fog of peace he'd wrapped himself in for 16 years had burned away, leaving only cold calculation. I need you to tell me everything, he said. The man who came, what exactly did he say? What did he look like? Everything, Mom. Don't leave anything out. Vera's resistance crumbled. She told him. The bald man's exact words. The way he'd grabbed her arm, his fingers leaving bruises. The sound of her own voice, small and frightened, pleading. The way he'd smiled when he hit her like he enjoyed it. The warning that accidents happen to old women all the time. Gas leaks, falls, heart attacks. By the time she finished, Garrett's face had changed. The gentle lines around his eyes had hardened. The set of his jaw had shifted. He looked B would tell the sheriff later like a different man entirely. Older and younger at the same time. A man who had seen the abyss and walked back out carrying its teeth. Stay here, Garrett said. Lock the door after I leave. Don't open it for anyone except B or me. Understand? Garrett, what are you going to do? He looked down at his mother, this tiny, fierce woman who had raised him alone after his father died, who had never once turned her back on him even when he deserved it, who had waited 16 years for him to find peace. What I should have done the moment they sent the first threat. He kissed her forehead, gentle as a whisper, then turned and walked out of the diner. The morning sun hit him like a slap. The desert stretched out in every direction, beautiful and indifferent. His Harley waited in the lot, chrome gleaming, but Garrett didn't head for his bike. Not yet. First, he had a visit to make. The Red Canyon. Sheriff's Department was a low, squat building at the edge of town, unremarkable except for the flag and the 2 patrol cars parked out front. Garrett pushed through the door into the air-conditioned interior where the young dispatcher, a kid named Tommy, who couldn't be more than 25, looked up and immediately went pale. Mr. Brennan, Sheriff Holloway is, I know where he is. I know. Garrett walked past the desk without breaking stride, his boots loud on the linoleum. Wade Holloway's office door was open. The sheriff sat behind his desk. Gray hair, military short, lean face, bent over paperwork. He looked up as Garrett's shadow fell across the threshold. Garrett? Hey. I was just... Wade's voice died. His eyes, cop's eyes that missed nothing, took in Garrett's expression and went carefully neutral. What's wrong? Garrett stepped inside and closed the door behind him. The click of the latch was loud in the sudden silence. My mother was assaulted this morning. Wade's face went through a rapid series of changes. Surprise, concern, confusion. What, Vera? Is she okay? What happened? You tell me, Wade. The sheriff stood, hands raised in a placating gesture. Garrett, I don't know what you're talking about. If Vera was hurt, why didn't she call? I'll send someone over right now. She did call. Garrett's voice was quiet. Too quiet. She's been calling for 3 months. Broken windows, vandalism, threats. You told her it was kids? Wade's face went from concerned to carefully blank. A wall going up. Garrett, there's been some property crime in town, sure, but there's no evidence it was targeted. I can't launch a full investigation every time someone's window gets broken. A man came to the diner this morning. Bald. Scar on his neck. He beat my 85-year-old mother until her face looked like hamburger, then told her she had 24 hours to sell, or there would be more accidents. Garrett took a step closer. You know anything about that, Wade? The sheriff's jaw tightened. Of course not. Jesus, Garrett, you think I'd let something like that happen? I'll put out an APB right now. We'll find this guy and... Stop. One word. But it carried such weight, such finality, that Wade's mouth snapped shut. Garrett moved closer around the desk until he was standing directly in front of the sheriff. They were the same height, but Garrett had 40 pounds on him, and right now every ounce of that weight was focused, compressed, dangerous. I've known you for 20 years, Wade. I know when you're lying, and you're lying right now. Garrett's voice dropped to a whisper. So I'm going to give you one chance. One. Tell me the truth. Who got to you? Wade's face crumbled. It happened all at once, like a building collapsing inward. His shoulders sagged. His eyes went red. He sank back into his chair and put his face in his hands. Jesus, Garrett. Jesus Christ. The silence stretched. Outside, a car drove past. A phone rang somewhere in the building. Normal sounds. A normal day. But in this office, everything had changed. Wade looked up. His eyes were wet. Sarah's tuition. The scholarship fell through. Community college turned into state university, and I couldn't afford it. Then, my wife's medical bills from the surgery. We were drowning. He took a shaky breath. They approached me 3 years ago, Apex Holdings. Just asked me to look the other way, smooth things over, make sure their property acquisitions went through without trouble. They paid good money, Garrett. Really good money. And it seemed harmless. Just some corporate stuff, Paperwork. Harmless. Garrett's voice was flat. My mother's face is broken, Wade. She's terrified in her own diner. That feel harmless to you? I didn't know. Wade's voice cracked. I swear to God I didn't know they'd go this far. They told me it was just business. Legal business. I never imagined they'd hurt anyone. Garrett stared at his friend, this man he trusted, and felt something inside him go cold and final. Disappointment, maybe, or just clarity. The friendship they'd shared, the beers and conversations, and shared history, all of it was ash now. Burned away by Wade's choice to look the other way while evil took root. The man who did it. Bald scar on his neck. You know him. Wade nodded miserably. Silas Kane. He's Apex's problem solver. Used to run with the Desert Jackals MC out of Vegas. He's got a place out past the old mining road near Dry Gulch Junction, about 5 miles east. He scribbled an address on a piece of paper with shaking hands and held it out. Garrett took it without a word. Garrett, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll resign. I'll make this right. You'll stay away from me and my mother. Garrett's voice cut through Wade's babbling like a blade. You'll keep your mouth shut about this conversation. And when this is over, you'll turn in your badge and hope to God the only price you pay is your job. He walked to the door, then paused, looking back. Wade looked smaller, somehow, shrunken by shame and regret. 20 years, Wade. We were friends. I know. I'm sorry. Not as sorry as you're going to be. Garrett left the sheriff's office and climbed onto his Harley. The engine roared to life, and he sat there for a moment, letting the vibration ground him, center him. The desert stretched out before him, vast and indifferent. The sun climbed higher, burning away the last cool mercy of morning. He knew what he was about to do, knew what it meant. For 16 years, he'd been Garrett Brennan, retired biker, dutiful son man seeking peace. But peace was a luxury he could no longer afford. His mother's broken face had shattered that illusion as thoroughly as his coffee cup on the diner floor. Somewhere out there, 5 miles into the desert, Silas Kane was probably sleeping off last night's drunk, secure in the knowledge that he delivered his message and scared an old woman into submission. He had no idea what was coming for him. Garrett kicked the Harley into gear and pointed it east toward Dry Gulch Junction, toward a reckoning that was 16 years overdue. The wind tore at his hair. The desert blurred past, and with every mile, Garrett Brennan receded, making room for someone older, harder, more dangerous. Ironstone was waking up, and Ironstone remembered how to hurt people. The ride to his cabin took 20 minutes, the Harley eating up the miles of cracked asphalt and dirt road that wound through the red rock formations like a scar through flesh. Garrett's cabin sat in the shadow of a towering mesa, a small weathered structure that had been his sanctuary for 16 years. It was simple: one room, a porch, a workshop out back. No neighbors, no noise except the wind and the occasional cry of a hawk. Perfect isolation, perfect peace. He cut the engine and sat there for a moment, hands on the handlebars, staring at the door. Once he walked through it, once he opened that hidden compartment and took out what was buried there would be no going back. The man who emerged from this cabin would not be the man who entered it, but his mother's face, swollen and broken, hung in his mind like an accusation. Garrett dismounted and walked inside. And the cabin was cool and dark, the thick adobe walls keeping out the desert heat. He moved through the space, without hesitation, kneeling beside the old trunk at the foot of his bed. Beneath the false bottom, wrapped in oilcloth, lay the artifacts of his past. His father's Colt, 1911, the blued steel still gleaming despite years and darkness. He lifted it, feeling the familiar weight settle into his palm like it had never left. The magazine slid home with a solid click. 8 rounds. Enough. Beside the gun lay his cut. His colors. The leather vest that bore the patches and symbols of the Crimson Riders Motorcycle Club. A snarling red serpent coiled around a skull, the club's emblem stitched in red and black thread. President Patch on the front. His road name, Ironstone, arcing across the back in letters that had once inspired fear in every outlaw bar from Nevada to New Mexico. He lifted the vest and held it up to the light filtering through the window. The leather was stiff from years of storage, but it still fit his shoulders perfectly when he shrugged it on. The weight of it, the smell of old leather and road dust, and memory. It brought everything back. The Brotherhood. The violence. The absolute certainty of purpose. In the mirror on the wall, a stranger stared back. Not Garrett Brennan, quiet man seeking redemption, but Ironstone, president of the Crimson Riders, a man who had ruled a territory with an iron fist and absolute loyalty, a man whose word was law and whose fury was biblical. He looked older now. The silver hair, the lines in his face, they told the truth about time past. But beneath the age, beneath the 16 years of peace, the predator was still there. Hungry, patient, ready. Garrett holstered the Colt at his hip, the weight of familiar comfort. He walked out of the cabin and climbed back onto his Harley. But this time, when the engine roared to life, it felt different. Not a morning meditation. A war cry. The address Wade had given him led to a rusted trailer sitting alone in an expanse of nothing, surrounded by scrub brush and broken dreams. A battered pickup truck, primer gray and dying, sat beside it. No other vehicles, no signs of life. Garrett parked 50 yards out and approached on foot, his boots silent in the dust. The sun was high now, brutal and unforgiving. Heat shimmered off the metal trailer like a living thing. He didn't knock. His boot hit the door just beside the lock, and the flimsy metal buckled inward with a shriek of tearing aluminum. The door flew open, banging against the interior wall, and Garrett stepped into the dim, cool space beyond. Silas Kane was on his feet in an instant. A massive man in his 40s, bald head, gleaming with sweat, thick neck bisected by a puckered scar that looked like someone had tried to garrote him and failed. He'd been eating a sandwich falling from his hand as he lunged forward with the speed of a man used to violence. But Garrett was faster. He sidestepped Kane's wild haymaker, feeling the wind of the punch pass his ear, and drove his elbow into Kane's solar plexus with surgical precision. The air left Kane's lungs in a whoosh. Before he could recover, Garrett grabbed his wrist, twisted it behind his back, and slammed him face first into the trailer wall. The thin metal boomed like a drum. Kane struggled, cursing, trying to twist free, but Garrett had 40 years of street fighting and bar brawls encoded in his muscle memory. He applied pressure to the wrist, forcing Kane's arm up toward his shoulder blade until something popped and Kane screamed. You broke an old woman's face this morning. Garrett's voice was calm, conversational, as if discussing the weather. My mother's face. He released the wrist and spun Kane around, slamming him against the wall again. Kane's eyes, wild and furious, met his, and Garrett saw the recognition dawn there. Ironstone. Kane's voice was a wheeze. Shit. You're supposed to be retired. I was. Garrett's fist shot out a short, brutal jab that caught Kane in the kidney. The big man folded, gasping. Past tense. He let Kane slide down the wall, then grabbed a fistful of his shirt and hauled him up, pinning him against the wall with his forearm across Kane's throat. Not enough to choke, but enough to make breathing difficult. Enough to focus the mind. Who sent you? Garrett asked. Who runs Apex Holdings? Kane's eyes darted left and right, looking for escape, finding none. Man, you don't understand. This is bigger than you. Bigger than your mother. You should walk away while you still can. Garrett pressed harder. Kane's face started to purple. Name. Now. Damien, Kane gasped. Damien Cross? He's the one. He runs the whole show. The name hit Garrett like a physical blow. His grip loosened fractionally. Kane sucked in air, coughing. Damien Cross. Flynn's son. Flynn Reaper Cross had been Garrett's vice president in the Crimson Riders, his second in command, his brother in everything but blood. They had ridden together, fought together, bled together for 15 years. When Garrett walked away from the club, Flynn had understood, supported him. They'd stayed friends, still met for beers once a month, still called each other brother. Flynn's boy Damien had been just a kid back then. Smart, ambitious, always talking about going legit, making real money, escaping the outlaw life. Garrett had encouraged it, thought it was good that the next generation wanted better. And now that kid was behind this, behind Apex Holdings, behind the threats and violence in his mother's broken face. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife. Not because Damien had chosen this path, Garrett barely knew the kid, but because it meant confronting Flynn, telling his oldest friend that his son had become the very thing they'd spent their youth fighting against. That conversation would destroy Flynn, would shatter whatever remained of their brotherhood. What's Apex really about? Garrett's voice was ice. The casino. That's not the whole story. Kane hesitated, but another press against his windpipe loosened his tongue. It's a front. The casino, the resort, it's all just paperwork for the real operation. Money laundering. $800 million running through shell companies, offshore accounts, properties bought and sold on paper. He coughed, tasted blood spat. And the women, trafficking, they bring them in from Eastern Europe, Southeast Asia, young girls. Promise them jobs, American dream, all that shit. Then the doors close and they disappear into the network. Brothels, private parties, rich men with fucked up appetites. Garrett's grip went slack. Kane slumped to the floor, wheezing. $800 million. Human trafficking. This wasn't just corporate greed. This was industrial scale evil. The casino was merely the visible tip of an iceberg built on human suffering. And Garrett had stumbled onto it because they'd been stupid enough to threaten his mother. Your mother's diner, Kane continued, his voice gaining strength as air returned to his lungs. It's the last piece. The land titles don't work without it. Some legal bullshit about contiguous properties and zoning. Without that diner, the whole thing falls apart. all the permits, all the approvals, they're contingent on owning that entire block. Damien's got investors, real bad people waiting for this deal to close. If it doesn't, he made a cutting motion across his throat. Garrett stared down at the man who had beaten his mother and felt nothing. No rage, no hatred, just cold calculation. Cain was a tool, a blunt instrument wielded by others. The real enemy was Damien Cross and whoever stood behind him. Where's the proof? He asked. Documents, photos, evidence. Cain's eyes went to a metal lockbox beneath the sagging couch. Garrett retrieved it, used Cain's keys to open it. Inside was a treasure trove. USB drives, printed ledgers, photographs that made his stomach turn, young women with dead eyes and bruised faces, some barely out of their teens. Bank statements showing transfers in the millions. Names, dates, locations. Shipping manifests. Communications between Damien and people whose names Garrett didn't recognize, but whose titles screamed organized crime. Everything needed to bring Damien Cross's empire crashing down. Garrett pocketed several USB drives and took photos of the documents with his phone. Then he looked at Cain, who was watching him with the wary eyes of a man who knew he was looking at death. You're going to turn yourself in, Garrett said quietly. You're going to tell the FBI everything. Testify against Damien and everyone involved. And if you do that, if you cooperate fully, you might see daylight again before you're 80. And if I don't, Garrett's hand moved to the Colt at his hip, not drawing it, just resting there. A reminder. Then I'll make sure you disappear into the desert, and no one will ever find enough of you to fill a shoebox. Cain swallowed hard. The riders won't let you touch me. I'm marked. I'm under Damien's protection. The riders answer to me. Garrett's voice was absolute. They always have. And when they hear what Damien's been doing, when they learn he used the club's name to build an empire on the backs of trafficked women, they'll help me bury him. He left Cain there, whimpering on the floor of his trailer, and walked back out into the punishing sun. The USB drives felt like grenades in his pocket. Evidence. Proof. The means to destroy Damien Cross. But first, he had to make a call he'd been dreading since Cain spoke the name. Garrett pulled out his phone and scrolled to Flynn's number. His thumb hovered over it. This conversation would destroy his oldest friend, would shatter a father's heart. But it had to be done. Flynn deserved to know what his son had become, deserved the chance to make his own choice about what came next. The phone rang twice before Flynn's familiar gravelly voice answered. Garrett, was just thinking about you. You okay, brother? The casual warmth in Flynn's voice made what Garrett had to say even harder. Flynn. Garrett's voice was hollow. I need to talk to you about Damien. A pause. My boy. What about him? He's behind it, Flynn. Apex Holdings. The threats against Vera. All of it. Silence. Long and terrible. Garrett could hear Flynn breathing, could almost feel the moment when understanding crashed through his friend's world like a wrecking ball. Say that again. Garrett told him everything. The assault. Cain's confession. The trafficking. The money laundering. The $800 million empire built on human suffering. He didn't soften it, didn't spare his friend. The truth was brutal, and Flynn deserved to hear it unvarnished. If there was any shred of the boy Flynn had raised left in Damien, any chance for redemption, Flynn needed to see the full scope of what his son had become. When Garrett finished, the silence on the other end was absolute. For a moment, he thought the call had dropped. Then he heard it, a sound he'd never heard from Flynn Cross in all the years they'd known each other. Crying. Not sobbing, not dramatic, just quiet, broken sounds of a man's world crumbling. The sound of a father realizing his child had become a monster. My boy, Flynn whispered. My son, he's a monster. I'm sorry, brother. Don't, Flynn's voice cracked. Don't apologize. You're telling me the truth. That's all we ever promised each other. Truth, no matter how much it hurts. Another long pause filled with breathing and the weight of 20 years of brotherhood dying in real time. Garrett waited, giving his friend space to process, to grieve. He knew Flynn well enough to know that beneath the shock and pain, the same iron core that had made him Garrett's vice president was already working through the problem, calculating what had to be done. What do we do, Garrett? We put him down, together, like the old days. He's my son. I know. If it was anyone else, I'd already be loading my gun. I know that too. Flynn sighed a sound like wind through a graveyard. Do it. Whatever you have to do. I'll stand with you. I'll help. But, Garrett, when it's done, when he's in cuffs or in the ground, I don't want to see you again. I can't. Every time I look at you, I'll remember what my boy became. Garrett closed his eyes. Losing Flynn hurt worse than he'd expected. But it was the price. Everything had a price. The brotherhood they'd shared the bond forged in blood and fire, it would end here. Not because of anger or resentment, but because some wounds were too deep to heal. Some truths too terrible to live with side by side. Understood. One more thing, Flynn's voice hardened steel beneath the grief. If he runs, if he tries to hurt you or Vera, you put him down permanently. I don't care about blood. I care about what's right. You hear me? I hear you. Good. Now go get my son Ironstone, and make it hurt. The line went dead. Garrett stood in the desert heat, phone in hand, and felt the last connection to his old life sever. Flynn was gone. The Crimson Riders, the Brotherhood, the bonds forged in blood and fire, they were ashes now. All he had left was vengeance. And a mother to protect. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Mr. Brennan, we should discuss a peaceful resolution. My office, Phoenix 9 p.m. tonight. Come alone. Damian Cross. Garrett read it twice. The arrogance was breathtaking. Damian actually thought he could intimidate Garrett into submission, lure him into a controlled environment, and make the problem disappear. He had no idea who he was dealing with. The boy had grown up hearing stories about Ironstone, probably thought they were exaggerated myths, tales told by aging bikers reliving their glory days. He was about to learn they were all true. Garrett typed a single word in response, agreed. Then he opened his laptop and began uploading Kane's files to an encrypted cloud server, one he'd set up years ago for exactly this kind of situation. Insurance. The kind you hoped you'd never need, but kept anyway. The upload would take hours. While it ran, he made preparations. First, he called 3 FBI field offices and left anonymous tips with specific details about Apex Holdings' operations. Not enough to trigger immediate action, but enough to get files opened enough to put Damian Cross on radar. Seeds planted that would grow whether Garrett survived the night or not. Second, he set up a dead man switch. A simple program that would automatically send all of Kane's evidence to law enforcement if Garrett didn't check in by midnight. Insurance. Leverage. The modern equivalent of leaving a sealed letter with a trusted friend, except the friend was an algorithm and the letter was a digital bomb. Third, he called Flynn back. I'm going to Phoenix tonight. I need you and the boys to watch Vera. If I don't come back, you know what to do. We'll be there. And Garrett... Flynn's voice was steadier now, grief hardening into purpose. Kill him clean. Don't make him suffer. He's still my blood, even if he's rotten. No promises. The rest of the day passed in preparation. Garrett cleaned the Colt, checked the magazine, loaded spare rounds. He showered, ate, forced himself to rest, even though his mind was racing. At 7 p.m., as the sun began its descent, he dressed in his colors and walked out to his Harley. The desert stretched before him, beautiful and merciless. Somewhere out there in the sprawl of Phoenix, Damian Cross waited confident and arrogant, believing he held all the cards. He was wrong. The ride to Phoenix took 2 hours, the desert landscape slowly giving way to sprawl and concrete strip malls and office parks, the scar tissue of civilization spreading across the land. By the time he reached the Apex Tower, a gleaming 40-story monument to wealth and power in the heart of downtown Phoenix, it was full dark. Garrett parked in the underground garage and rode the elevator up. The security guard at the lobby desk took one look at his colors, the Colt on his hip, and reached for his phone. But whatever he saw in Garrett's eyes made him think better of it. He just watched pale and silent as Garrett walked to the private elevator and pressed the button for the penthouse. The doors opened onto a vast open space, all glass and steel and minimalist furniture, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering city. Damian Cross stood by those windows, his back to the elevator, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Garrett's Harley. Beside him stood Marcus Steele, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, Damian's senior partner and enforcer, dressed in a three-piece suit that screamed old money and East Coast privilege. "Mr. Brennan," Damian said without turning. "Punctual. I appreciate that in a man." He turned slowly, and Garrett got his first good look at Flynn's son in person. Damian was in his late 30s, handsome in a cold corporate way, with his father's strong jaw, but none of his warmth. His eyes were empty, shark eyes, calculating and dead. This was what happened when ambition consumed everything else, when the hunger for power burned away every human quality until only the predator remained. Though I must say, Damien continued, his gaze sliding over Garrett's colors dismissively, your fashion choices are a bit theatrical for a business meeting. Garrett said nothing. He simply walked further into the room, his boots silent on the polished concrete floor, until he stood 10 feet from Damien. Close enough to see the contempt in the younger man's eyes, close enough to reach him if it came to that. "Let's skip the pleasantries," Garrett said quietly. "I know what Apex really is. I know about the trafficking, the money laundering, the $800 million in dirty money. I know about Silas Kane and the others like him. I know everything, Damien." Something flickered across Damien's face. Surprise, quickly masked. He'd expected Garrett to come in angry, emotional, easy to manipulate. Instead, he was facing a man in complete control, armed with information that could destroy everything. Silas has quite an imagination. Whatever story he told you. Garrett pulled out his phone and held up the screen. Photos of young women with dead eyes, ledgers showing transfers, bank statements, shipping manifests with highlighted sections. This isn't imagination. This is evidence. And I have all of it. Marcus Steele shifted his hand, moving inside his jacket, but Damien held up a hand. "Let's all stay calm. Mr. Brennan, what exactly do you want? You dissolve Apex Holdings, you return every property you've stolen, and you turn yourself into the FBI." Damien laughed. Actually laughed, a cold, brittle sound that echoed in the cavernous space. "Or what? You'll go to the police with your so-called evidence. Evidence obtained through what I'm sure was a completely legal and not at all violent encounter with Mr. Kane." He shook his head. "I have lawyers, Mr. Brennan. Very expensive lawyers. And I have reach you can't imagine. You're an aging biker playing dress up. You have no idea who you're dealing with." He took a step closer, his voice dropping to something that probably worked on boardrooms and courtrooms, but fell flat against the simple reality of violence. Your mother. Vera isn't it 85 years old? Such a dangerous age. Accidents happen all the time. Gas leaks, falls, heart attacks. It would be tragic if something happened to her because her son made poor choices. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Garrett's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes, something ancient and terrible, stirred. The predator recognizing another predator, weighing, measuring, finding the younger man wanting. Don't, he said quietly. Don't what? Damien smiled. Don't remind you that you're powerless here, that you rode into my city, my territory, and expected to dictate terms. You're nobody, Brennan. You're a relic. And if you don't delete every piece of that supposed evidence right now and walk out of here, I'll make sure your mother's final days are very, very painful. Marcus Steele pulled a small silver revolver from inside his jacket, aiming it not at Garrett's chest, but at his kneecap. Professional, calculated. The kind of threat that left a man alive, but broken. Delete it. Now. Every file, every photo, every backup. Or, I put a bullet through your knee and we do this the hard way. Garrett looked at the gun, then at Damien's confident smirk, then at Steele's cold professional gaze. He appeared to deflate slightly, shoulders sagging, the fight going out of him. All right, he said softly. You win. His fingers moved across his phone screen, pulling up photo galleries, files, cloud storage. He made a show of selecting them, his thumb hovering over the delete button. Damien leaned in, watching satisfaction evident on his face. Garrett pressed delete. The screen showed a confirmation. Files deleted. He swiped to another app, deleted more. Cloud storage emptied. Damien's smile grew wider, the smile of a man who believed he'd won, who thought power and threats were enough to control the world. Good. See, that wasn't so hard. Now you're going to go back to your little desert town and convince your mother to sell. Tomorrow. And we're all going to forget this unpleasant. I lied, Garrett said. Damien's smile froze. What? I didn't delete anything. Well, I deleted the copies on this phone. But the real files, Garrett's expression shifted, the defeat falling away like a mask revealing something cold and dangerous beneath. I uploaded those hours ago to a secure server. And if I don't check in by midnight, if my signal goes dark, if anything happens to me or my mother, every piece of evidence gets automatically sent to the FBI, DEA, Interpol, and every major news outlet in the country. He glanced at his watch. You've got about 2.5 hours to decide, Damien. Surrender now or watch your empire burn. The color drained from Damien's face. Marcus Steele's gun wavered just slightly, but enough to show that the professional veneer had cracked. You're bluffing, Damien said, but his voice had lost its certainty, the corporate smoothness giving way to something desperate. Am I? Garrett pulled out a second phone from his pocket, this one showing a countdown timer. 2 hours, 27 minutes, 34 seconds. Ticking down inexorably. There's your proof. You've got until midnight. After that, the whole world sees what you really are. Damien's composure shattered like glass. You have no idea what you've done. The people I work with, they don't forgive. They don't forget. You think you're in danger now, you've just signed death warrants for everyone you care about. Then you better hope you're in federal custody before they find out, Garrett said calmly. Because if you're not, if this goes public while you're still free, those same people will come for you. And they'll make what I'm threatening look like mercy. The standoff stretched, seconds ticking by on the countdown timer, each one bringing Damien closer to complete destruction. Steele kept the gun trained on Garrett, but his hand was shaking now. The professional killer, recognizing that he'd walked into a trap far more sophisticated than he'd anticipated. We could kill you right now, Damien said desperately. Dump your body, stop the upload, and spend the next 2 hours trying to hack military-grade encryption. Garrett smiled without humor. Good luck. The only way that timer stops is if I enter a 16-digit code that changes every hour. You torture me for it. I give you the wrong code, and you've wasted your time. You kill me, it's over. You lose. He took a step toward Damien, and despite the gun in Steele's hand, despite everything, Damien took a step back. The predator instinct recognizing a greater predator. Your father sends his regards, by the way, Garrett said quietly. Flynn knows everything, and he's the one who told me to make it hurt. For the first time, genuine fear showed in Damien's eyes. My father disowned you. The moment I told him what you'd become, he's standing watch over my mother right now with the Crimson Riders. Your father, your blood has chosen my family over you. That's how far you've fallen. The words hit harder than any fist. Damien's face crumpled not in sadness, but in rage and something deeper. The realization that everything he'd built, all the wealth and power, meant nothing if his father looked at him with disgust. You destroyed my life. You poisoned my father against me. This is all your fault. You self-righteous piece of... The elevator pinged. Everyone froze. The doors opened, and 4 men in FBI windbreakers stepped out, weapons drawn, led by a hard-eyed agent in his 50s who moved with the confidence of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. Damien Cross, Marcus Steele, you're under arrest for human trafficking, money laundering, racketeering, and about 70 other charges. Put the gun down, sir. Now. Marcus Steele looked at his revolver at Damien, at the FBI agents, and slowly, carefully placed the gun on the floor and raised his hands. The professional in him recognized when the game was over. Damien turned to Garrett with pure hatred in his eyes. You called them. You brought them here. 3 hours ago, Garrett confirmed. I sent them everything before I ever walked through your door. The countdown. That was just to keep you talking. The evidence was already in federal hands. As the agents moved in with handcuffs, Damien's legs gave out. He dropped to his knees, not from force, but from the sheer weight of his world ending. Everything he'd built, every compromise he'd made, every line he'd crossed, all of it was collapsing in real time. My father will never forgive you, he whispered. He already has, Garrett replied. Because I saved him from having to bury his son as a free man. This way you get to live. Locked up, yes. Hated, definitely. But alive. He turned and walked toward the elevator, the FBI agents parting to let him through. Mr. Brennan, the lead agent called after him, we'll need your statement. Tomorrow. I need to get home. My mother's waiting. The elevator doors closed on the scene. Damien on his knees, Steele in cuffs, agents swarming like ants over a carcass. Garrett rode down alone, the adrenaline finally wearing off, leaving him hollow and exhausted. He emerged into the Phoenix night, climbed onto his Harley, and pointed it toward home. Toward Red Canyon. Toward Vera. The ride back was long and dark, the highway empty, his thoughts churning. He'd won. Damien was finished. Apex Holdings would collapse. The evidence would save dozens, maybe hundreds, of women from that hellish pipeline. But the cost. Flynn. His oldest friend. That friendship was done severed cleanly and finally. And the peace he'd fought so hard to earn. Gone. The moment he'd put on his colors, the moment Ironstone had woken up, that fragile, quiet life had shattered. Could he go back? Could he take off the colors again, put away the gun, and return to being just Garrett? He didn't know. The desert welcomed him home as dawn broke. painting the sky in familiar reds and golds. He pulled up to the Haven Diner just as the sun cleared the horizon. Inside, Vera sat at the counter, her face still bruised, but cleaned up a cup of coffee in her hands. Flynn sat beside her, his eyes red-rimmed, his face aged a decade in one night. Around them, 5 other Crimson Riders stood watchmen Garrett had ridden with in another lifetime, answering Flynn's call to protect what mattered. Vera looked up as the door opened, and her face battered and swollen as it was lit up with relief and love. "You came back. Always, Mom." Flynn stood, and for a moment the two men just looked at each other across the diner floor, across the wreckage of their friendship. Then Flynn extended his hand. Garrett took it, and they shook a final farewell. The grip was firm, the gesture laden with everything unsaid. 20 years of brotherhood ending in a handshake. "He's in federal custody," Garrett said quietly. "He'll spend the rest of his life in prison, but he'll live." Flynn nodded, unable to speak. He pulled Garrett into a brief, fierce hug, then released him and walked out without another word. The other riders followed, engines roaring to life in the parking lot, fading into the desert morning. And then it was just Garrett and Vera and Bee, who emerged from the kitchen with a plate of pancakes. "On the house," she said with a tremulous smile. Garrett sat beside his mother, and she reached over and took his hand, her small fingers wrapping around his scarred knuckles. "Is it over?" she asked. "It's over." "And are you okay?" Garrett looked down at his colors, at the patches and symbols of a life he tried to leave behind. Slowly, he shrugged out of the vest and laid it on the counter. Not hiding it, not destroying it, just setting it aside. "I will be," he said. "Give me time." Because that was the truth. He'd done what needed doing, protected what mattered, brought down a monster. But the cost was there in the faces he'd never see again. The friendships burned to ashes. The peace shattered. Could he rebuild it? Could he find his way back to quiet mornings and simple rhythms? He didn't know. But as Vera squeezed his hand and Bee set down a plate of golden pancakes, as the familiar smell of coffee and bacon filled the air, and the first customers of the day began to arrive, Garrett thought maybe, just maybe, he could try. Not by bearing Ironstone again, but by accepting that Ironstone was part of him, always would be. The difference was choosing when to let that beast out and when to keep it caged. He'd made his choice, saved his mother, brought justice. Now it was time to see if a man could live with both his past and his future, holding them in balance like a knife's edge. Time to find out if redemption was something you earned once or something you had to choose again and again every single day. Garrett picked up his fork and took a bite of pancake. It tasted like home. The morning sun climbed higher, burning away the last traces of night. Red Canyon woke slowly around them, trucks rumbling past on Main Street, the town going about its business unaware of how close it had come to losing one of its oldest landmarks. Garrett sat with his mother and ate pancakes and drank coffee, and for the first time in days, the knot in his chest began to loosen. But 3 days later, the phone rang at 3 a.m. Garrett jerked awake from dreams of blood and burning buildings, grabbed his phone, and saw a number he didn't recognize. A sense of dread settled over him even before he answered. "Mr. Brennan," the voice was professional, clipped, female. "This is Special Agent Claire Donovan, FBI. We need to talk." Garrett sat up, fully awake now. "About Damian Cross, Marcus Steele, and some inconsistencies in your statement." He'd given his official statement 2 days ago, spending 6 hours in a windowless room going over every detail. He'd told the truth mostly, left out the parts where he'd assaulted Silas Kane, made unrecorded threats operated outside any legal framework. The agents had seemed satisfied. Apparently, they'd found something. What kind of inconsistencies? The kind we should discuss in person. There's a field office in Flagstaff. Can you be there this afternoon? Say 2 o'clock. It wasn't really a question. Garrett looked at his watch. Flagstaff was 2 hours north. I'll be there. Good. Ask for me at the front desk. She paused. And Mr. Brennan, come alone. The line went dead. Garrett sat in the darkness of his cabin, mind racing. The FBI had Damien. They had the evidence. The case was airtight. So what did they want with him? Unless they'd started digging deeper. Following the money trails, the connections, the web of corruption that an operation like Apex Holdings required. And if they dug deep enough, they might have found something Garrett had missed, or they'd found out something about Wade Holloway. Or worse. He went inside, strapped on the Colt, out of habit, then thought better of it and left it in the lockbox. Whatever this meeting was, walking into an FBI office armed would send the wrong message. He grabbed his leather jacket, the one without patches or symbols, and headed for his Harley. The ride north was beautiful in the way the desert always was. In early autumn, the heat beginning to break the light, turning golden. Garrett tried to enjoy it, tried to let the wind and the road clear his mind, but unease sat in his gut like a stone. Something was wrong. The Flagstaff field office was a nondescript building in an office park, all glass and beige concrete. Garrett parked signed in at the security desk and was escorted to a conference room on the 3rd floor. Agent Claire Donovan was waiting. She was in her early 40s, dark hair pulled back, sharp eyes that missed nothing, wearing a pantsuit that had seen better days. Across from her sat another agent, younger male, with the build of someone who spent serious time in the gym. Mr. Brennan, thank you for coming. She gestured to a chair. This is Agent Marcus Webb. Please sit. Garrett sat. The room was cold, the air conditioning aggressive. He noticed the camera in the corner, the red light indicating it was recording. Am I under arrest? He asked. Should you be a test? Garrett met her eyes without flinching. You tell me. Donovan smiled thinly and opened a folder. Let's talk about Silas Kane. You claim he voluntarily provided evidence against Damian Cross. He did. After you, quote, convinced him it was in his best interest. Your words. That's right. Mr. Kane has a dislocated shoulder, 3 broken ribs, and a concussion. His trailer door was kicked in. There's blood on the walls. She looked up. That seemed like a voluntary conversation to you. Garrett said nothing. The silence stretched, but he'd learned long ago that silence was often the best defense. Let them fill the gaps with their assumptions. Agent Webb leaned forward. We're not interested in charging you, Mr. Brennan. Kane's a piece of shit who beat an 85-year-old woman. As far as I'm concerned, he got off light. But we need to understand what really happened because there are some pieces of this case that don't add up. Donovan slid a photograph across the table. It showed a man Garrett didn't recognize, 50s, expensive suit, standing outside a building with the casual confidence of someone who owned the world. Recognize him? No. His name is Nathan Voss. He's a venture capitalist out of Los Angeles. Very connected. Very wealthy. And, according to financial records we've subpoenaed, he's the primary investor in Apex Holdings. $800 million didn't come from Damian Cross's pocket. It came from a consortium of investors, and Voss was the biggest. She slid over another photo. This one showed Voss shaking hands with someone Garrett did recognize. Sheriff Wade Holloway. This was taken 6 months ago at a fundraiser in Phoenix. Your sheriff and Nathan Voss looking very friendly. Donovan's eyes bored into him. Did you know Wade Holloway was on Apex's payroll? I found out 3 days ago. From who? From Wade. I asked him directly. And what did he say? Garrett chose his words carefully. He said Apex had been paying him for 3 years to look the other way, to smooth over complaints, make sure their property acquisitions went through without problems. Did he say why he took the money? His daughter's tuition? Medical bills? He was drowning in debt. Donovan nodded, making notes. Wade Holloway resigned 2 days ago. He's cooperating with our investigation. But here's the thing, Mr. Brennan. Voss disappeared the day after Damien was arrested. Private jet left the country 12 hours after the arrest went public. We tracked it to the Cayman Islands, then the trail went cold. She pulled out more photographs, spreading them like cards. Each showed a different man or woman, all expensively dressed, all unfamiliar to Garrett. These are the other investors. Every single one of them has vanished in the last 72 hours. Accounts closed, properties sold. It's like they evaporated. She looked at Garrett. Someone warned them. Someone with inside knowledge tipped them off that Damien was going down, and they scattered. You think it was me? Did you tell anyone about the raid before it happened? Garrett thought back. He'd called Flynn, told him everything. But Flynn wouldn't have warned them. Flynn wanted Damien stopped, wanted the entire operation destroyed. The man had given his blessing to take down his own son. He wouldn't have sabotaged that. Would he? I told Flynn Cross, Damien's father. But Flynn wanted Damien stopped. He gave me permission to do whatever it took. We'd like to talk to Flynn, Webb said. Where can we find him? Red Canyon. He's been staying at my mother's diner, helping keep watch. Donovan made another note. We'll send someone, but I'm going to be frank with you, Mr. Brennan. This case just got a lot more complicated. Damien Cross isn't the top of the pyramid. He's middle management. The real players, the people actually running this trafficking operation, they're still out there. And now they're in the wind. The weight of it settled on Garrett like a physical thing. He'd thought he'd won. Thought bringing down Damien would end it. But he'd only cut off one head of the Hydra. The body was still alive, still moving, still destroying lives. What do you need from me? He asked. Everything you know, every detail, no matter how small. We're building a case against the entire network, but we need more than financial records. We need witness testimony. We need someone who can connect the dots. She leaned forward. Did Silas Kane mention any other names? Any other locations? Garrett tried to remember. The trailer. Kane bleeding on the floor, singing to save his skin. He mentioned the ports. Said they bring the women in through shipping containers. Legitimate cargo companies, but with people hidden inside. He didn't give specifics. Did he say which ports? No, just that it was West Coast, probably Long Beach or Oakland. Webb typed rapidly on the laptop. That matches some intercepts we've had. There's been suspicious activity at Long Beach for months, but we haven't been able to nail down the specific operation. Donovan pulled out a voice recorder. I'm going to need you to tell me everything again. Every conversation with Kane, with Wade, with Damien. Every detail you can remember. And then we're going to ask you to do something that you're not going to like. Garrett's jaw tightened. What? Testify in open court against everyone we can catch. You're going to have to tell your story in front of a jury under oath, knowing that defense attorneys are going to tear into you about your methods, about assaulting Kane, about threatening Damien, about everything you did outside the law. And if I refuse, then a lot of very bad people stay in business. A lot of women keep disappearing. And Damian Cross might walk on a technicality because the evidence chain is compromised. She held his gaze. I know you're not a Boy Scout, Mr. Brennan. Your jacket from 20 years ago makes that clear. But you came to us. You handed us this case. So finish the job. Garrett sat back, the full scope of what he'd started finally hitting him. He'd wanted to protect his mother, destroy the people who hurt her. He'd gotten that. But in doing so, he'd kicked over a hornet's nest of international crime, and now the FBI wanted him to stand in the spotlight and take the hits. When do you need my answer? Today would be good. We're moving fast on this. Every hour those investors stay free is another hour they can hide. Assets, destroy evidence, disappear witnesses. Garrett thought about Vera, her face still healing from Silas Kane's fists. Thought about the photographs he'd seen young women with dead eyes. Thought about Flynn, broken and grieving for the son he'd lost to greed. I'll do it, he said. Whatever you need. Donovan's expression softened slightly. Thank you. Now, let's start from the beginning. The debriefing took 4 hours. Garrett recounted everything in excruciating detail, answered every question, clarified every timeline. By the time they finished, it was past 6, and his throat was raw from talking. We'll be in touch, Donovan said as she walked him to the elevator. Probably within the week. And, Mr. Brennan, watch your back. If Voss and his people think you're a threat, they'll come after you. These aren't street thugs. They're professionals with resources. I can handle myself. I'm sure you can. But your mother can't. Neither can Flynn Cross or anyone else you care about. Just be careful. The elevator doors closed, and Garrett rode down alone, exhaustion settling into his bones. He thought this was over. Thought he could go back to his quiet life. He'd been wrong. The ride back to Red Canyon was dark and cold, the temperature dropping as the sun set. Garrett's mind churned through everything he'd learned. Nathan Voss. A network of investors, an operation spanning continents. He'd stumbled into something far bigger than a local land grab, and now he was in the middle of it whether he wanted to be or not. He pulled up to the Haven Diner around 9 p.m. The lights were on warm and welcoming. Through the window he could see Vera at the counter, Flynn sitting across from her, the two of them talking quietly. The sight brought a strange ache to his chest. His mother and his best friend, or former best friend, bonded by shared trauma. The bell jingled as he entered. Both of them looked up, and he saw the question in their eyes before they asked it. FBI wanted a debrief, he said, sliding onto a stool. About Damien, about the case. It's bigger than we thought. Flynn's expression darkened. How much bigger? Garrett told them. About Voss, about the investors, about the network still operating? Flynn listened in silence, his face growing grayer with each revelation. So Damien was just a cog, he said when Garrett finished. A middleman? Yeah. And the real monsters got away. For now, Flynn stood abruptly, his stool scraping against the tile. I need air. He walked out into the parking lot, and Garrett watched him through the window, standing beside his bike, head bowed. Vera reached over and squeezed Garrett's hand. He's taking it hard, she said softly, knowing his son was part of something like this. I know. Are you okay? Garrett looked at his mother, her bruises fading to yellow and green, her eyes still slightly swollen. She'd been beaten, terrorized, nearly lost everything. And she was asking if he was okay. I'm tired, Mom. I'm so damn tired. Then rest. Let the FBI handle it from here. I can't. They need me to testify. And if I don't, Damien might walk. Vera's hand tightened on his, Then you testify, you tell the truth, and then you come home and we figure out what comes next. The door opened, and Flynn came back in, his eyes red, but his jaw set. I want in, he said without preamble. Whatever you're doing with the FBI, whatever comes next, I want to help. Flynn, my son did this, my blood. That makes it my responsibility to help fix it. He looked at Garrett with raw determination. I can't bring those women back. Can't undo what Damien did, but I can help catch the people who used him. I can do that much. Garrett studied his old friend and saw the truth there. Flynn needed this. Needed to feel like he was fighting back against the evil his son had served. Needed to believe that some part of him was still worth something. All right, I'll talk to Agent Donovan. See if they can use you. Flynn nodded. Thank you. They sat in silence for a moment, the three of them bound by trauma and blood and the weight of choices made. Then Vera stood, moving toward the kitchen. I'm making pancakes. You two look like you need comfort food. As she disappeared through the swinging door, Flynn looked at Garrett. I meant what I said that night, about not being able to see you after this is done. But until it's done, until we've nailed every last one of these bastards, I'm with you. Like the old days. Like the old days, Garrett agreed. But they both knew it wasn't true. The old days were gone. The Brotherhood, the club, the simple certainty of us versus them, that world had died. What they had now was something more fragile, held together by shared purpose and guilt, and the desperate need to make something right in a world that felt irreparably broken. Vera returned with 2 plates stacked high with golden pancakes, and they ate in the quiet diner, the only customers in a town that was slowly going to sleep. Outside, the desert stretched away into darkness, vast and indifferent. And somewhere out there, Nathan Voss and his network of predators were planning their next move. The days that followed settled into a strange rhythm. Garrett helped Vera at the diner during the mornings Flynn came by most afternoons, and they pretended that everything was normal, even as federal agents periodically called with questions, updates, requests for clarification. Wade Holloway was cooperating fully with the investigation, his testimony providing crucial details about how the corruption had worked, how Apex had systematically bought off local officials across 3 states. But the investors remained ghosts. Nathan Voss especially seemed to have vanished into thin air. The FBI had frozen what assets they could find, but the sophisticated network of shell companies and offshore accounts meant that most of the $800 million had disappeared with him. Then, a week after the Flagstaff meeting, Agent Donovan called with news. We found one of them, she said, and Garrett could hear the controlled fury in her voice. Patricia Morrison. She was one of Voss's inner circle, handled logistics for the trafficking routes. Homeland Security picked her up trying to board a flight to Dubai using a fake passport. And she's talking, gave us names, locations, account numbers, the whole network. Voss, the investors, the trafficking operation, it's all connected to something called the Meridian Group. They're not just running women, Garrett. They're running weapons, drugs, money, everything. This is organized crime at the highest level. Garrett's grip tightened on the phone. What do you need from me? Can you get to Phoenix by 8 a.m. tomorrow? We're organizing a multi-state operation. DEA, Homeland Security, Interpol. We're hitting them all at once before they can scatter further, and we need you to ID someone. Who? A pause that stretched too long. We think Flynn Cross might have warned Nathan Voss. The words hit like a fist to the gut. That's impossible. Flynn wants these people destroyed. Then come prove it. 8 a.m. Phoenix Field Office. Don't be late. The line went dead before he could respond. Garrett sat in his cabin, phone in hand, staring at nothing. Flynn. His oldest friend, the man who'd stood by him through everything, who'd given permission to take down his own son. Could Flynn have betrayed them? No. Impossible. But doubt, once planted, grew like poison. He dressed quickly in the pre-dawn darkness and was on his Harley by 4 a.m., racing through the empty desert toward Phoenix. The stars wheeled overhead, brilliant and indifferent. The road unwound beneath his tires, and with every mile the doubt grew heavier. If Flynn had warned Voss, if he'd helped the investors escape, then everything Garrett had done, all the violence and sacrifice, had been for nothing. Worse, it meant he'd been played, used as a weapon to eliminate Damien, while the real architects of the operation escaped. The thought made him sick. The Phoenix field office was buzzing with activity when Garrett arrived at 7:45. Agents moving with purpose, phones ringing, computer screens showing maps and surveillance photos. Donovan met him at security, her face haggard from lack of sleep. Conference room 3, now. She led him through the chaos to a small room where Agent Webb and 2 other people waited. A man in a DEA jacket and a woman in an expensive suit who had prosecutor written all over her. On the screen at the front of the room was a surveillance photo, grainy but clear enough. It showed Flynn Cross standing outside a gas station talking on a cell phone. The timestamp read 2 hours before Damien's arrest. Garrett's stomach dropped. We pulled phone records, Donovan said. Flynn made 3 calls in the hour before we raided Damien's office. 1 to you, which we expected. 1 to a number registered to a burner phone in the Cayman Islands. And 1 to a number that pinged off a cell tower in Los Angeles, right near where Nathan Voss was last seen. She brought up more images. Phone records highlighted sections showing the call's duration timestamps. The Cayman number received a wire transfer of $2 million the next day, originating from an account owned by one of Voss's shell companies. No. Garrett's voice was hollow. Flynn wouldn't. He hated what Damien became. Did he, the prosecutor, a woman named Sandra Yates, leaned forward? Or did he hate that his son got caught? Flynn Cross has no legitimate income. No pension, no job, no assets. Where's his money coming from? Mr. Brennan. The club. The Riders take care of their own. The Crimson Riders MC hasn't existed as an active organization for 16 years. Most of its members are dead in prison or retired. There's no collective fund, no support network. She slid a document across the table. But Flynn Cross has $200,000 in a savings account opened 3 months ago. That's a lot of money for a man with no job. Garrett stared at the document, at Flynn's name, at the numbers. His mind refused to process it. This couldn't be real. Flynn wouldn't betray him, wouldn't betray everything they believed in. We think Flynn was part of it from the beginning, Webb said. We think Damien recruited his own father, used him as an inside man to keep tabs on you, to make sure you stayed retired and quiet. And when you started making noise, when you went after Silas Kane Flynn, warned Voss to cut their losses and run. Then why did he tell me to take Damien down? Because Damien was a liability, Yates said. Sloppy, arrogant, leaving evidence everywhere. They needed him gone before he brought down the whole operation. And who better to do it than you? The legendary Ironstone, motivated by revenge for his mother. You were the perfect weapon. The room spun. Garrett gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. I don't believe it. We need you to talk to him, Donovan said. Wear a wire. Get him to confirm it. We can't make the charges stick without evidence of intent, and right now it's all circumstantial. But if we can get him on tape, admitting he warned Voss, admitting he took money, we can take down the whole network. You want me to betray my best friend. We want you to help us catch a man who's complicit in human trafficking and racketeering. The same crimes you came to us to stop. Her eyes were hard. This is what justice looks like, Mr. Brennan. It's not always pretty. Garrett stood the chair, scraping loudly. I need to think. You have 1 hour. We're executing warrants at 10 a.m., whether you help or not. But without Flynn's testimony, we lose Voss. We lose the whole network. Donovan's voice softened slightly. I know this is hard, but those women Kane talked about, the ones being trafficked, they're still out there. Still being moved. Still suffering. And every day we wait is another day they're in hell. Garrett walked out without answering. He found himself in the parking lot, standing beside his Harley, staring at nothing. The sun was climbing, heat building another beautiful Arizona day, beginning while his world collapsed. Could Flynn really have done this? Sold out everything they'd believed in for money? Or was the FBI wrong? Building a case on circumstantial evidence and coincidence. His phone rang. Flynn. Garrett, where are you? Vera's worried. You left before dawn without a word. The voice was the same, concerned, brotherly, familiar. Garrett closed his eyes and listened for any hint of deception, any false note. He heard nothing but genuine worry. I'm in Phoenix, FBI stuff, about the case. Need backup, I can be there in 2 hours. No, it's just testimony prep. I'll be back tonight. A pause. You sound strange. Everything okay? Yeah, just tired. All right. Well, ride safe, brother. Brother. The word was a knife twisting in his gut. Garrett hung up and stood there, phone in hand, torn between loyalty and justice, between the past and the future, between the man he'd been and the man he was trying to become. Agent Donovan appeared beside him, holding a small electronic device. A wire. Decision time, she said quietly. Garrett looked at it, then at her, then at the city spreading out around them, millions of people, living their lives unaware of the darkness lurking beneath. He thought about the photos of those women, the dead eyes, the bruises, the fear. He thought about Vera's face, beaten and swollen. He thought about Damien in a federal cell, probably already planning his appeals, his escape, his return. And he thought about Flynn, the brother he'd chosen, the friend who'd stood by him through hell. If Flynn was innocent, this wire would prove it. If he was guilty, then the man Garrett had called brother for 20 years was a stranger wearing a familiar face. Garrett took the device. Tell me what to do. 2 hours later, Garrett sat across from Flynn in a booth at a truck stop diner halfway between Phoenix and Red Canyon. The wire was taped to his chest, a tiny microphone, hidden beneath his shirt, transmitting to the FBI surveillance van parked 200 yards away. Flynn looked tired, older than his years, stirring a cup of coffee he hadn't touched. You sounded bad on the phone. I figured we should talk face to face. Yeah. Garrett's mouth was dry. There's something I need to ask you. Shoot. The FBI thinks you warned Nathan Voss. Think you were part of the operation from the beginning. Flynn's spoon stopped mid-stir. His eyes came up meeting Garrett's, and for a moment, there was nothing there but shock. Pure, unfiltered shock. Then, slowly, his expression changed. The shock faded, replaced by something harder to read. Resignation, maybe? Or relief. The bottom dropped out of Garrett's world. How much do they know? The words were a punch to the gut. Garrett had been hoping, praying that Flynn would laugh it off, call it crazy, prove the FBI wrong. But he hadn't. They know about the phone calls, the money in your account, the timing. Garrett's voice was barely above a whisper. Tell me it's not true, Flynn. Tell me they're wrong. Flynn looked down at his coffee, his weathered hands gripping the cup, like it was the only solid thing in a world coming apart. I can't. The silence stretched, broken only by the distant sounds of the diner dishes, clattering voices murmuring the world, continuing oblivious to the death of a 20-year friendship. Why? The word came out broken. Flynn took a breath. Because my boy asked me to. Damien. 3 years ago, he came to me, said he had an opportunity, a way to make real money, leave the outlaw life behind for good. He needed someone on the inside, someone who could keep an eye on things in Red Canyon, make sure no one asked too many questions. He looked up, his eyes wet. I said no at first, but then he told me how much money was involved, how it would set us both up for life, how we could finally have something. So you just helped him traffic women, launder money, destroy lives. I didn't know about the women. Not at first. Damien said it was just corporate stuff, real estate development. By the time I found out what it really was, I was in too deep. They had evidence of my involvement enough to put me away for life. I was trapped. Garrett's hands clenched into fists under the table. You could have come to me. You could. And told you what? That I'd sold out. That I'd become exactly the kind of scum we used to fight. Flynn's voice cracked. I was ashamed, Garrett. I couldn't face you. Couldn't face what I'd become. So when I started going after Damien, when I came to you with what happened to Vera, I panicked. Called Voss, told him you were a threat. They wanted me to kill you. Make it look like an accident, but I couldn't. You're my brother, Garrett. I couldn't do that. He wiped his eyes. So I convinced them to let Damien handle it. Said you'd back off if Damien could neutralize you politically. When that didn't work, when you kept pushing, I knew it was over. You told me to take Damien down, gave me permission to destroy your own son, because I knew if you didn't, Voss would have you both killed. At least this way, Damien goes to prison instead of a grave. At least you get to live. Flynn's face was wet now, tears running unchecked. I tried to save you both the only way I could. By betraying us both. Yes. The admission hung in the air, heavy and final. Garrett felt something inside him break a bond that had held for 20 years, snapping like a dry branch. All the rides they'd taken, all the fights they'd survived, all the promises made and kept, all of it was ash now. The FBI is listening to this conversation, he said quietly. I'm wearing a wire. They're going to arrest you when you leave here. Flynn went very still. Then slowly he smiled. It was a sad, broken expression, but genuine. Good. I'm glad. He reached across the table, and Garrett didn't pull away when Flynn gripped his hand. Thank you, brother, for ending it, for giving me a way out that doesn't involve a bullet. Flynn, no, listen. I'm done running. Done lying. Done being something I hate. If I go to prison, at least I can finally sleep without seeing those girls' faces. He squeezed Garrett's hand. You did the right thing. You always do. That's why you're the better man. Garrett's vision blurred. I didn't want this. I know, but it's what I deserve. Flynn released his hand and stood. Tell Vera I'm sorry. And tell Damien, tell him I love him even though I failed him. He walked toward the door, shoulders squared, head high. Garrett watched him go, watched through the window as FBI agents emerged from unmarked cars, as Flynn raised his hands without being asked as the cuffs went on. Flynn looked back, once met Garrett's eyes through the glass, and nodded. A final acknowledgement. A goodbye. Then he was gone. Garrett sat alone in the booth as agents retrieved the wire, as the FBI swarmed the parking lot, as his world rearranged itself around this new, terrible truth. Flynn had betrayed him, had been part of the machine that hurt Vera, that trafficked those women, that built an empire on suffering. But Flynn had also loved him. had tried in his broken way to protect him. And now Flynn was gone too, just like Damien, just like the Crimson Riders, just like everything Garrett had known. He was alone. Agent Donovan slid into the booth across from him. You did good. That was hard, and you did it anyway. He confessed to save me. Maybe. Or maybe he was just tired of running. She pushed a folder across the table. Flynn's testimony, combined with what we got from Patricia Morrison, gives us everything we need. We can roll up the entire network. Voss, the investors, the trafficking routes, all of it. How long will Flynn get? 20 years minimum? Probably more. She paused. I'm sorry. I know he was your friend. Garrett stood, leaving the folder untouched. I need to go home. We'll need you to testify at the trials. Could be months from now, but I'll be there. He walked out into the parking lot, where his Harley waited in the harsh midday sun. The FBI was loading Flynn into an unmarked car. Flynn's eyes found him one last time, and Garrett saw everything there. Regret, love, shame, relief. Garrett nodded. A farewell, an acknowledgement. A final goodbye to the man who'd been his brother in all but blood. Then he climbed on his bike and rode away, leaving Phoenix and the FBI and Flynn behind. The desert welcomed him back, vast and indifferent. The miles disappeared beneath his tires. His mind was empty, scraped clean by betrayal and loss. By the time he pulled up to the Haven Diner, the sun was setting, painting the sky in violent reds and purples. Vera was on the porch, watching for him like she'd known he would come. He dismounted and walked to her, and she held out her arms. Garrett collapsed into them, this woman who'd given him life, who'd waited 16 years for him to find peace, who'd been beaten because of his past and stood by him anyway. Flynn, she asked softly. Arrested. He was part of it. He betrayed us. Vera held him tighter. I'm sorry, honey. I'm so sorry. They stood there as the sun died and the stars emerged. Mother and son, the last two people standing in the wreckage of Garrett's old life. What now? He asked. Now we rebuild. Not the past. Something new. Something better. She pulled back to look at him. You're not Ironstone anymore, Garrett. You're not the president of the Riders. You're just a man who protected his mother and fought for justice. That's enough. Is it? It has to be. Later, after Vera had gone to bed, Garrett sat on his porch, watching the desert night. His phone buzzed. A text from Agent Donovan. Raids went down at 6 p.m. 12 arrests across 4 states. 3 trafficking safe houses shut down, 17 women recovered. You did this, Garrett. Those women are free because of you. He read it twice, then set the phone down. 17 women. Free. Damien in federal custody. Flynn arrested. The network collapsing. And all it had cost was everything he'd known, everyone he'd trusted, the last remnants of his old life. Garrett looked at his hands scarred and calloused from 63 years of living hard. They'd built things and broken things, held friends and struck enemies, carried him through darkness and brought him stumbling toward light. Were they clean now? Could they ever be? He didn't know, but tomorrow the sun would rise, the desert would wake, Vera would make pancakes, and Garrett would choose once again to be something other than what he'd been. Not Ironstone, not the president, not the monster. Just Garrett. A man trying to live with what he'd done and who he'd lost. It would have to be enough. Inside his mother's diner waited warm and welcoming smelling of coffee and possibility. Garrett stood, walked to the door, and stepped inside. Behind him, the desert stretched away into darkness, infinite and forgiving. Tomorrow would come, whether he was ready or not, and he would be there to meet it. The weeks that followed were harder than Garrett expected. The arrests made national news. Apex Holdings, Damian Cross, the trafficking ring. Nathan Voss's manhunt, all of it splashed across television screens and newspaper headlines. Red Canyon, usually ignored by the world, suddenly had news vans parked on Main Street, reporters asking questions, federal agents conducting interviews. Garrett avoided them all. He helped Vera at the diner, kept his head down, waited for the storm to pass. But the damage was done. Everyone in town knew what had happened, knew that Garrett Brennan, quiet man, who'd lived among them for 16 years, was actually Ironstone legendary outlaw, and that he'd single-handedly brought down a criminal empire. Some people looked at him with new respect, others with fear, a few with disgust. The anonymity he'd worked so hard to build was gone, burned away by the harsh light of publicity. But, slowly, gradually, the news crews left. The headlines moved on to other scandals. Red Canyon returned to its quiet rhythms, and Garrett learned to live with the weight of what he'd done. The trial came 6 months later. Federal court in Phoenix. Garrett testified for 3 days, recounting every detail, facing down defense attorneys who tried to paint him as a vigilante, a criminal, a man who'd taken the law into his own hands. He didn't deny it, just told the truth. Damian Cross was convicted on 73 counts, sentenced to life without parole. Marcus Steele got 40 years. Silas Kane, in exchange for his testimony, got 15. Wade Holloway lost his badge, served 2 years for corruption, came out broken. And Flynn Cross, who'd cooperated fully with prosecutors who'd given them everything they needed to dismantle the Meridian Group, still got 25 years. He'd be 85 when he got out, if he lived that long. Garrett went to see him once at the federal prison in Nevada. They sat across from each other in the visiting room, separated by scratched plastic, and said nothing for a long time. Finally, Flynn spoke. "You look good. How's Vera?" "Good. Strong. The diner's doing well." "Good." More silence. "I'm sorry," Flynn said. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry for all of it." Garrett nodded. "I know." "Do you hate me?" "No, I don't hate you, Flynn. I just don't know you anymore." Flynn's eyes were wet. "Yeah, I guess you never did." Garrett stood to leave, and Flynn raised a hand to the glass. Garrett looked at it, then placed his own hand against the plastic matching Flynn's. "Goodbye, brother." "Goodbye, Ironstone." Garrett walked out of the prison and never went back. Nathan Voss was never found. The manhunt stretched across 3 continents, but the man had vanished like smoke. Interpol kept the case open, but as years passed, the trail grew colder. He was out there somewhere Garrett knew. Still wealthy, still free, still dangerous. But 17 women had been saved. The trafficking pipeline through the Southwest had been destroyed. The Meridian Group had been crippled, maybe permanently. It wasn't perfect justice, but it was something. 3 years after Vera's assault, on a morning that felt like every other morning, Garrett rode his Harley through the desert toward the Haven Diner. The sun rose in familiar reds and golds. The air smelled of creosote and dust. The engine rumbled beneath him like a heartbeat. He parked in the gravel lot, dismounted, walked inside. Vera was at the counter, 88 now, but still moving with that familiar grace. Bia was pouring coffee for the truckers. The checkered floor gleamed. The red vinyl booths waited. Home. Garrett slid onto his usual stool, and Vera set down a cup of coffee without being asked. Morning, honey. Morning, Mom. She smiled, and Garrett saw that she'd finally stopped looking at him with worry, with fear that he'd disappear into his past and never come back. She'd made her peace with who he was, with what he'd done, had accepted that her son was both Garrett and Ironstone, and that the two couldn't be separated. Pancakes, please. While she cooked, Garrett looked around the diner, at the photographs on the wall, at the familiar faces of Red Canyon's regulars, at the life he'd fought so hard to protect. His colors hung in his closet at home, folded carefully but not hidden. The Colt 1911 sat in its lockbox, cleaned and maintained, but rarely carried. The past was still there, still part of him, but it no longer defined him. He'd learned to live in the tension, to be the man who had done terrible things for good reasons, to carry the weight without letting it crush him, to accept that redemption wasn't a destination, but a choice made every single day. Vera set down a plate of pancakes, golden and perfect. Garrett picked up his fork and took a bite. It tasted like home. Outside the desert, stretched away in every direction, vast and beautiful and indifferent. The sun climbed higher. The day began. And Garrett Brennan, 66 years old, scarred and weathered, and still standing, was there to meet it. Not running from his past, not hiding from his future, just living. One sunrise at a time.